Hi from hello from Toronto, Canada. It's 8 p.m. over here, and we're actually entering into our springtime, I guess, as you go into your winter. But we're almost having winter. We might get snow this weekend, which for me is absolutely ridiculous. You're with me for the next hour. We'll have an opportunity for some Q&A here. Wendy and I have worked out a method by which we can have some regular breaks during the program to give you an opportunity to ask some questions. What I am hoping to focus on here today is the broad theme of what do we need to do to reinvent ourselves for a future which is vastly different from anything we ever expected before. We are all living through history. We are all living through a period of time that is seeing, absolutely massive forms of volatility. It's kind of a thrill to speak to you in Australia. I've been to your nation several times, and I wish I could find myself on a beach like this right about now. I was actually in Sydney on your bicentennial way back in 1988, was it? 2 million drunken Sydney siders under the bridge, and I was sort of looking, wow, this is really quite an amazing country. I also understand that we have some folks coming in from Asia and elsewhere around the world. So welcome, and let's get right to it to cover what we need to think about is going on in the world today. Now, to start out, I want to tell you about my old life. My old life had me hanging out in places like this. I was on stage in Las Vegas. I was recently on stage in Morocco for the World Bank at a massive global conference. I've spoken in Zurich, in Sydney, and all over the world for Fortune 1000 companies like the PGA, Disney, Johnson & Johnson. Even NASA had me in twice to speak to a room full of astronauts about the future of space, about innovation, and about disruption, and what we need to do to align ourselves for a new and dramatic world. And like everyone else, my world came to a absolutely fascinating change. I'm actually coming to you live now from my basement. This is where I am. A little bit of B-roll that we filmed the other day. You'll catch my wife here in a moment doing the filming. Like everybody else in the world, my world has just dramatically changed. And I went into this with a mindset that I couldn't wait around. I couldn't wait for the future to catch up and figure out what is going to go on. I needed to reinvent my future. I needed to be the person responsible for determining what I would do in these dramatic new circumstances. The challenge in doing this is, look, we're all zoomed out. How many Zoom meetings have you been to? How many conferences have you been to which have suddenly moved online? You are finding throughout your day that you're having to participate in Zoom meetings with your business colleagues, with the associations that you are a part of. And then at the end of the day, you've got to go on a Zoom meeting with your family, with your relatives. By the time 9 o'clock rolls around, you're going, I've had enough. I'm totally zoomed out. And this is one of the trends that I wrote about just the other day. But when you're a speaker on stage and you're trying to gain the interest of folks into what is coming next with the future, and everybody's zoomed out, you got to work doubly hard to try to maintain relevance. Remember the olden days? That was our world just about 2 months ago. And you would go to a conference, you would go to an event, you would go to a leadership meeting, and you would sit and you would watch someone present a bunch of PowerPoint slides. And they would walk through those slides step by step, slide by slide. You would soon find yourself nodding off in complete exhaustion. We were PowerPointed out. Well, what is happening already in this new world, and we're only 2 months in, is people are getting zoomed out. And I discovered early on that what I needed to try to do from my basement was to try to bring some of the energy, some of the insight, some of the disruptive thinking that I would do on a stage in front of 7,500 people in Las Vegas and try and do it in my basement. Because I think the most important thing that we need to focus on right now is how do we rapidly reinvent ourselves for this new future. So ever since this thing started, I have been working extraordinarily hard to build up the sophistication of what I can do in this home broadcast studio, to do something different, to align myself to a world in which change is happening faster than ever before. I've even got a bunch of stage marks around the floor here where I've got to hit my mark at the right time. And what I've been doing is a series of regular broadcasts to people around the world. I'm talking to a variety of organizations about how I can bring myself into their leadership meetings when they are ready to talk about the future, to talk about trends, and to talk about disruption. And I've been doing it with the type of video that you see online here now. I have totally abandoned the concept of being a simple talking head on Zoom with a bunch of slides, and instead pushing the limits with context-sensitive material that relates to what we're going to talk about. And that's what I'm going to cover right now. Now, we're going to have the opportunity throughout this period of time for Wendy to jump in to take any questions that are coming up via the chat. So when we see this symbol, Wendy's going to jump in, and let's see if there's some issues that we want to try to put on the table right away. Yeah, that's been sort of the key premise that I've used for years, and we'll probably discover me talking about that 5 or 6 slides in. I've been out on stage for 25 years talking to organizations, and one of the key themes that a lot of leadership companies have brought me in for, whether they were pharmaceutical companies or manufacturing companies or anyone else, the issue that's been on the table is agility, flexibility. How do we respond to the fact that product life cycles are collapsing, new competitors are emerging faster than ever before. We're dealing with new skills, workforce issues that we never had to deal with, and they're coming at us with staggering speed. Everywhere I go, the issue has been, that's a tough one. There's a meeting publication in the United States called Successful Meetings. And I actually wrote an article for that publication in 2002. It's on my website, so Wendy, you can share a link to it afterwards. And you'll remember the buzz that occurred after 9/11. People were saying that, look, there's going to be no more in person meetings. Everybody's going to be too scared to travel. We're going to do everything online. It's all going to be webinars. And I wrote this article that was called Get Real. And I said, look, we crave for personal interaction. We crave the opportunity to get together with people. And one of the most important things about association meetings or industry meetings or leadership meetings is the ability for people to network, to have that drink at the end of the day and have a discussion. It's not just about the content, it's the personal interaction. I think the challenge with this compared to 9/11 is we know the path out of this is going to be very, very different. And that's part of the new challenge of volatility that we have to deal with. So, where do we start? Well, let's talk about farming. Every week I've been doing an online broadcast where I'm talking about some of the leadership and innovation issues that I've seen out there. And my broadcast last Thursday, while I was preparing, I came across a local farmer outside of Toronto. Now, this individual for years has been taking his product, organic product, and very specialized agricultural products to various farmer market locations in the Toronto region. His world came crashing down. Farmers markets have been shut down. The ability to reach out to that consumer with his product suddenly came to an end. And during my research, I came across a fascinating story where he put into perspective how quickly he moved to align himself to this new reality. Now, I'm going to play the first 30 seconds of this video. As I said, I'm living by the seat of my pants, pushing the boundaries of what I can do online. So we do have an audio problem with this. Turn up your speakers because the sound will be difficult to hear. I will paraphrase the 30 seconds afterwards, but this is a critically important story.
It's not an online store. It's building an entirely new distribution path for local food. I've said since day one, growing food, it's a challenge, but it's relatively easy, right? Getting that food to somebody has been the bigger challenge. There was the old food system that existed 2 weeks ago. There's a new food system that's being figured out right now, and I don't think we'll be going back. I hope we're not going back.
Did you hear what he said? The old food system that existed 2 weeks ago. And I don't think we're going to be going back. What this farmer did was, as soon as he saw the fast pace of the closures that were occurring in the Toronto and Canada and other regions of the world, is he aligned himself to innovate extremely quickly. And he did several things. Number one, he brought together his local community of farmers with the idea that, look, we should have an online e-commerce site. We're not going to be able to take our product to market for quite some time, so let's sell our products online. Let's not stop there. Let's hire young university people who are going to be unemployed through the summer because of the closure. Let's hire them for local food delivery. Farmers markets, like many industries as agriculture, were immediately impacted by the dramatic events that were occurring here. But this fellow had a mindset that, look, the world has changed and I'm going to realign myself to the reality of what was occurring. That's the type of fast-paced innovation which we have witnessed everywhere in the world right now. In my own case, I'm working hard to reinvent myself in terms of online broadcasting capabilities. Where did I discover some of the opportunities emerging? You know who's doing some of the most innovative things with online broadcasting capabilities and taking webinars to the next level? Churches, temples, and mosques. I've discovered online communities where these folks have suddenly realized that the congregation can no longer come to their facility. They need to reach out to their parishioners, and they need to utilize leading edge technology to reach those people. They need to innovate fast. I am stunned by some of the speed of innovation that I am witnessing out there today, because I think there's this massive global, worldwide recognition that we can't wait for the future to happen. We need to make the future happen, and we need to make that future happen now. I witnessed this up at my ski village north of Toronto. We have a chalet up there, and we're in a small community of several thousand people. They've locked down the region. And likewise, local business has been suffering in terms of the impact of the lockdown that has occurred up there. And what I've witnessed with this municipal government organization is extremely fast innovation with digital mapping tools to advise people as to where they are allowed to travel to and some of the regions they are forbidden to voyage to. They also set up a local directory of local stores and merchants, encouraging people to shop locally, encouraging people to go down that path of local support, given the rapid rate of change which is occurring. Look, I've barely been able to keep up just by observing my own small world with what is happening. And think about what you have witnessed in the trend towards curbside pickup. I am stunned by what has happened with retailers everywhere I look. 2 months ago, they were in a world in which shoppers came into their stores, and you are now witnessing every single moment, every single day, a retailer who has put in place a sophisticated electronic commerce system, a sophisticated pick and pack system, a sophisticated system for curbside pickup. We talked about electronic commerce and pick and pack and online shopping for years and years and years in the world of retail. But all of a sudden, because of urgency, because of necessity, because of fast moving events, people have had to all of a sudden do it, and they've had to do it quickly. That's echoed my own reality in that, I've had to reinvent, my entire world for a basement broadcast studio, and I've had to do it just like that. What is happening right now, and I think one of the sources that you have for innovation, is that all innovation today is fast, it's local, it's accelerated, it is intense. It is happening at a speed that is simply staggering. And that goes back to the question from the previous panelist about, is the world really one for, the future belongs to those who are fast. Brief break for a pause, Wendy, and let's take a few more questions. Boy, that's a tough one, because we do know that number one, this is a lifeblood for so many people in terms of social interaction, in terms of business necessity, from so many different perspectives. And it's one of those issues. I know in Canada, we have talked about the rural divide for quite some time, that we should have a grand national strategy to make sure that we have fast broadband throughout the country. We're still not there. And there is no doubt that there are people who are not able to participate. Look, my wife and I are involved with a local charity up by our ski village for young adults who are developmentally challenged. Young adults, are suffering from Down syndrome, autism, later in life, and they need an active program. So prior to this event unfolding, we had a location that they could go to every day to participate in social activities, a little bit of skills training, things like that. It is all of a sudden shut down. We know there are some program participants that don't have access, and it's a crying shame. I think part of what this shutdown might do is accelerate some of the discussions that we've been having as to what is critically necessary in a society. Another really good example is what is occurring with the number of deaths occurring from COVID-19. We know it is something that hits the elderly population. I know in Canada, it is running amok within our seniors care facilities because, like many other countries, maybe we have not invested enough in an adequate and proper seniors infrastructure care system. A lot of hard questions are unfolding right now, and I think what we're going to see is a lot of really challenging discussions by societies as to where do we go with this in the future. Boy, do I ever! I actually had a blog post I wrote the other day, and I've got the sheet of paper here. With 10 things I've learned going through the meltdown. And two of those points. Number one was, one of them was embrace the uncertainty. Uncertainty is the new watchword. Uh, you know, keep your plan vague because we don't know exactly what is going to happen. That's agility, that's flexibility, that's making it up in the fly. Because one joke I put out a little while ago is this new future, we don't know exactly where we're going, but we're making great time. Oh, yeah. I mean, look, we are doing all of our grocery shopping online through e-commerce systems, and that's the project that my wife has taken on. She hasn't dared trust me to do the grocery shopping, but orders go wrong, and you want to contact them, and you want to get an answer to what has gone wrong. But look, these folks are overwhelmed. I don't think organizations ever presumed that their online support systems would be subjected to such extreme demand and such heightened expectations. Everybody expects every online retailer, every financial organization, every single company, every single airline, every single travel company to operate at the same level of customer service excellence that they get with someone like Amazon. I spoke about this in the olden days 2 months ago when I spoke about, we've got this accelerating the bar of expectations with customer excellence keeps on getting higher and higher and higher. That was a trend that was there before this. I think it's a trend that is simply accelerated in this new reality. We've got to give these companies a break. So, what do we do about all this uncertainty? This is how you're feeling. I mean, we're all dazed and confused. We're all comfortably numb. Some rock and roll quotes there. Uh, Battered and bruised. I mean, the speed with which this has come about has been absolutely staggering. But here's something I know. I think this is like my fifth or sixth recession. I've been through a few of these, and I think I've learned some things along the way, and I've gained some insight into what I think leaders and entrepreneurs need to do to align to this new reality. Here's what I observed post 9/11, and I watched it happen again with the 2008 and 2009 global economic meltdown. What I discovered with my global client base was that people stopped making decisions. They sort of developed an attitude of, well, we're not quite sure when the future is going to happen. We are not quite sure how the future is going to happen. We're not even quite sure what the future is going to be. So we're going to postpone those decisions that we should be making, the capital investments, or investing in a new customer support infrastructure, or pursuing some new product or new product opportunity. Companies and leaders and executives and people became really indecisive. And way back in 2002, in a Canadian publication, the Globe and Mail, I had a regular column. I said, what I'm witnessing with a lot of organizations is people are suffering from what I call aggressive indecision. Not only are we indecisive, we have become aggressively indecisive. And I think that's one of the most important cultural attitudes that we should kill. We have to kill aggressive indecision. We have to decide to make decisions. We have to decide to move forward. Because history has taught us that, look, it's those organizations, it's those people, it's those leaders who focus on the future, who make decisions, to decide to move forward, to decide to make personal or business investments, those are the ones that get ahead. So recognize indecision for what it is and move away from it. I think number two, you have to choose what type of person do you want to be? I have a friend who accuses me of being relentlessly, obnoxiously optimistic. But I think I have to be. Look, as a futurist, I can't walk out on stage, I can't walk into a Zoom call and say, guess what? Your future sucks. I wouldn't get a lot of repeat business. It's not really a great business model. But I think it is true, because I think what can happen with a period like this is we can focus too much on the doom and gloom. We can focus too much on the downside. I think we have to choose to be relentlessly optimistic. I force myself to approach each and every day with an attitude that, look, there's opportunity out there. There are trends which are unfolding. There are realities occurring which will somehow provide me an opportunity going forward. I don't know what it is. It's all very uncertain. I don't know what the timing of it is, but I'm going to be focused on opportunity. I'm going to be focused on the future. I'm going to be focused on innovation. I'm going to be relentlessly optimistic. And I think that's a mindset. That is a conscious decision in terms of what you are going to do. I think the third thing is decide to join the 10%. When the 2008 economic downturn occurred, I ended up spending a lot of time on stage for the next 3 years talking to organizations around the world about how to innovate your way through an economic downturn. And one of the key messages that I got across to folks was, look, we know we're going to have a period of economic recovery. These are the global trends which are driving future growth. Be a part of those trends. And while I was focused on that message, I came across a remarkable study from General Electric. It was their global head of innovation. And he had a look at what happened during previous periods of economic downturn. He looked at the oil shock of the 1970s. He looked at one of the downturns in the 1980s. He looked at what happened in the dot-com collapse of 2001, post 9/11. And what he found was kind of staggering. He found that 60% of the organizations he studied, they were suffering from aggressive indecision. They weren't doing anything big and bold. They cut costs. They focused on survival. They focused on what they needed to do to get through. They sort of muddled their way through. 30% of the organizations disappeared. They didn't make it. They were merged. They were bought out. They went bankrupt. But 10% of the organizations that he studied became breakthrough performers because they specifically decided, despite lingering economic uncertainty and despite volatility and despite not having a clear path towards the future, right now was the time to focus on the future and to focus on opportunity. Look, you have a choice right now that you can make today. Are you going to be part of that 60%? Are you going to be part of that 30%? Or are you going to choose to be part of that 10% and become a breakthrough performer because you are convinced that opportunity exists? History tells us that those people, those organizations, and those leaders exist, and they are the ones to win in the future. Going back to the question which came in earlier, how do we deal with this world in which change is happening so quickly? Well, look, it's over that way. One of my books written years ago was based on the theme that the future belongs to those who are fast. That has been my consistent mantra to every single organization. And that is what Global 1000 CEOs have been focused on when they've been bringing me in for events around the world. How do we pick up the speed? How do we align to faster change? And now change is happening faster than ever before. We need to align ourselves for the fact that this new form of speed is relentless. It's ongoing. If we don't have speed, if we don't have agility, we don't have what it takes to get us through this long and complex new reality. Another key trend. What are you doing to move yourself along the 7 stages of economic grief? When we had the downturn in 2008, I witnessed what was happening with some of my clients. Look, when we go through a downturn like this, we went through it's similar to what occurs with a bereavement. We go into the shock phase. We go into the denial phase. We go into the anger stage. We eventually get through to the acceptance. I'll get the angle right. The acceptance. Still haven't got that right. It's over there. The acceptance stage. And it's what you choose to do in terms of the 7 stages of economic grief. that can really define, what you will do to go forward in this future. I think it's a conscious decision. I decided this on day one, the day that the global stock market went down, that I needed to move myself along the 7 stages of economic grief faster. And this is still the pinned tweet on my Twitter feed at Jim Carroll, the document in which I write about the 7 stages of economic grief. And the conscious decision that we're going to get away from anger and denial and shock and all the things that go with a downturn like this, and we are going to force ourselves to go into the acceptance stage, because that is absolutely critical to what we might do in going forward into this new fast-paced future. Wendy, another opportunity for some questions. That's a tough issue because, as I will get into in a little while, some industries are going to reinvent themselves faster, and I think the big challenge is we are going to have a massive skills mismatch, which is even bigger than the skills mismatch that we had before. Think about the world of manufacturing. A lot of what is occurring, and what I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, is what is occurring with robotic technology in advanced manufacturing capabilities. For quite some time, there has been no shortage of jobs in the manufacturing sector. They just weren't the right skills. There's a quote I used with one manufacturing company that observed that the typical machinist today has to be able to do trigonometry in their heads, given that the manufacturing process and the utilization of sophisticated machines has become so intense. So I think a part of the big societal challenge going forward is how do we address that skills mismatch? And I was actually in a national newspaper column a couple of weeks ago talking about that from the education perspective. What do we need to do in terms of a bold national strategy to deal with the skills issue? And that's why I've always liked, in Canada, we call them community colleges. I don't know what you call them in Australia, but that those types of organizations have sort of been of the mindset of, what skills, what career capabilities does the corporate world need right now? Cool, let's put together a course on that to get that to them in a few months, rather than long, complex career development projects. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of terror out there, there's a lot of people hurting, there's a lot of unanswered questions as to where we are going. I think the economy is going to get somewhat worse before it gets better. But at the same time, I like to encourage people to think on a 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, 10 year perspective, because 10 years from now, we're going to sit back and go, wow, remember that? We lived through history. But now we're in a new and different economy. And what did we do to make sure we were a part of it? I'm living the pricing issue all the time. I mean, look, I'm represented by some amazing global speakers bureaus. There's one in New York that represents Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, and myself. There's another one in Washington that represents George Bush and Condoleezza Rice and myself. I mean, I'm with speakers bureaus that book presidents and prime ministers and sports figures, and every once in a while I pinch myself and go like I've got the luckiest career. And in the old world, I charged a significant fee for the work I did. I only did about 40 events a year. That has all changed. I'm now hanging out in my basement, and I am reinventing my business model quickly. And I fully recognize that having to play with prices is probably going to be a key part of that. This is not the old world anymore. This is a new world. We're in an economic downturn. People are much more sensitive to cost. Uh, we've got to innovate, change, and adapt. And you only do that by trying to do things you haven't done before. Try an idea, see what works. Uh, Reinvent yourself, reinvent your business model. It's all part of the deal. I'm living and breathing that every single moment of every single day. I think you have to have both. I think we've got to have the coping mindset to get through every single day. I know I've been on an absolutely emotional roller coaster. I made the national news last week and I was on a tremendous high because that was a huge win. And I'm going to show that video clip later on near the end of this broadcast. But the next day was back to the crushing reality that, look, my world has changed. I'm not on stages. I'm not getting the calls I used to call. I think, part of what we have to do is deal with that emotional roller coaster on a day by day basis, but keep our sense of optimism intact by keeping aware of the trends which are going to take us forward in the future. And it goes back to my point that right now there are people thinking big and bold in terms of what we can do in the future. We're going to look back and several years from now and go, wow, there were new industries invented. There were new ideas that were pursued. There were people who were pursuing concepts that changed our world. Look, after 9/11, what are some of the technology companies that came out right after that? YouTube, Facebook, and others. People looked at the future when 2001 post.com. They said there's no future for technology companies, and they invented multi-billion-dollar companies. That's a reality. There's people thinking big and bold. What are you going to do to try and be a part of that from a long-term perspective? Okay, so that directly ties into the next thing. Rethink these trends. It's the perfect segue into the fact that I think that what we need to do is to think about these long-term trends. And when I was on stage years ago or 2 months ago, I was talking about self-driving cars and talking about robotics and artificial intelligence and big data and all of these things. And I actually had a new book come out in January. Think big, start small, scale fast. That has been my mantra for quite some time. We need to think really big about the future. Given how quickly things are evolving, we've got to work really fast to try to get there. We've got to start a lot of small scale projects to understand what is happening. What I've realized in the last 2 months is a lot of what I've been talking about in the past, those trends have not gone away. Some of those trends have been deferred. They will occur later on. They have slowed down. But some of those trends have picked up a staggering form of speed. And let me walk you through just a few of these trends. Number one, think about what has occurred in response to COVID-19. What we have witnessed in the last 2 months, you've probably seen the same news stories. A whole bunch of manufacturing organizations and individuals in their homes, research institutions and universities, suddenly using their 3D printing capability to 3D print nasal swabs, surgical masks, and all kinds of other medical devices. All of a sudden, around the world, 3D printing technology rose to the forefront. Now, I've been talking on stage about 3D printing technology as a very disruptive technology for years. But I think what has now happened is this is one of those trends that has suddenly gone into hyperdrive. It has now gained a new degree of executive level attention. It has now gained a new respect amongst manufacturing organizations worldwide who are watching all these stories about 3D printing and going, wow, it's real, it's big, it's huge. Even Lamborghini in Italy took their 3D printing technology and realigned it from the printing of parts for cars and used it to print surgical masks, given the scope of the devastation occurring in that country. That's an example of a trend which hasn't gone away and which has actually picked up speed. So I think part of what we do is we look at future trends, we put them under a new microscope to determine, what is happening with that particular trend. Is it speeding up? Is it slowing down? What does it mean? Think about the world of manufacturing. Think about the issue of social distancing. The traditional manufacturing model has a whole bunch of people coming to a facility. They're all working together in close proximity. And as we somehow return to a semblance of a new normal, we know that social distancing realities are going to become a key part of what we need to do. This is where I think we will see another trend pick up accelerated speed. And that's what we call cobot technology, cooperative robots. A robot technology that knows how to work in close proximity to humans and to other robots. Most of the cobot technology that we know so far has worked behind a cage. But part of the trend that has been occurring with cobot technology through the last several years is it is emerging from the cage to work in close proximity with humans. And already we've seen a whole bunch of industrial engineers, industrial designers, manufacturing companies saying that they are going to accelerate their use of cobotic technology to realign their manufacturing facilities for this new era of socially distanced manufacturing. Think about the world of agriculture. Now, I know agriculture is big in the Adelaide and certainly throughout the Australia region. And again, we're going to have social distancing issues. We're going to have issues in terms of how do we farm, how do we bring product to market. And there has been an acceleration of self-driving technology, robotic technology throughout the agricultural sector. Last year, I spoke to 500 mushroom farmers for the North American Mushroom Conference. And I was talking to one individual who had developed a robotic mushroom picking cap machine. Now, apparently, when a human picks a mushroom cap, if it's bruised, it's damaged, it loses value. So what he developed was a robotic technology which could cleanly pick the mushroom cap, thereby preserving its value. I think we're going to see a massive acceleration of robotic technology throughout the agricultural sector. Think about what we are doing with agricultural inspection. For years in the world of agriculture, there's been a trend of what we call precision farming. And that's how do we utilize deep data, analytics, real-time information to analyze a crop for disease, for humidity, for water levels, for nutrient, for all kinds of other information. And all of a sudden, a drone technology comes along that is very disruptive because it allows us to undertake that precision farming technology role from up in the air. And my oldest son actually has a precision farming agricultural drone company where he is actively engaged through the agricultural sector. And as we go through the COVID-19 crisis, there are farmers and crop consultants realizing we're in this new world in which we have to do things differently from a social distancing perspective. We need to do things which are far more efficient. If we are going to analyze our crops, then maybe now is the time that we should pursue precision farming from a drone up in the sky. That's where the issue of rethinking the timing of your future comes in. When I would go on stage in the olden days, 2 months ago, I would often talk about what I called the Gartner hype cycle. Gartner is a technology research firm. And they said, look, when any new technology or any new concept comes to our world, it goes through the hype cycle. It appears, we have the trigger. Everybody gets really excited about the technology. And we hit the peak of inflated expectations. And then we realize, look, it's going to take a lot of work to make this technology go. People become dispirited. They conclude the technology has no hope. We hit the trough of disillusionment. But in the meantime, the pioneers are there. The adherents, the people who truly believe in the technology, they're working with it to make it into something real. And eventually we hit the plateau of productivity. You can take every single concept, you can take every single technology which has come to our world, and you can put it on the Gartner hype cycle. Think about the concept of electronic commerce. It appeared in the 1990s. I wrote 34 books about the internet in the 1990s. I had one book which was called Selling Online and said, look, people are going to sell things on the internet. We hit the peak of inflated expectations in 2000, 2001. Companies were valued in billions of dollars, even though they had no sales through their online stores. We had the inevitable dot-com collapse in 2001. We hit the trough of disillusionment. I actually lost my newspaper column in 2001 because the editor concluded, look, people aren't going to shop online. There's no more technology yet to come. The tech era is over. But look at Amazon today. Look at the role of online shopping today. Look at what is happening with curbside pickup, where every single local retailer has all of a sudden put in an e-commerce shopping site. We're at the plateau of productivity. So I think part of what is occurring out here is a lot of the trends which were a part of our world in the olden days 2 months ago, they haven't gone away. They've simply changed. They've been deferred. Some are speeding up, some are slowing down. And so if you're trying to understand what you need to do to align yourself to the future and innovate, it's examining your world and the trends in your world and putting them under this new microscope in terms of the timing of what might occur. Now, a lot of this is a mindset issue, and it involves the issue of what do you do, from a leadership and entrepreneur perspective to align yourself to this reality. There's been a leadership concept around for quite some time that we call VUCA: volatility, uncertainty, ambiguity, and complexity. And this emerged in publications like the Harvard Business Review some years ago. They said that, we're in this world in which a lot of change is coming at us extremely quickly. We need to align ourselves to new forms of volatility. Volatility is the new normal. There's a lot of uncertainty where we're going. Well, I mean, this defines our reality right now. VUCA, we are living the era of VUCA with everything that is going on. And I think the key thing to do is to align yourself to ambiguity. It goes back to one of the questions which came in early in the Q&A. What do we do to deal with uncertainty? Align to it, accept it. It's part of it. Make it up as you go. There is no long-term plan. There's only short-term thinking and short-term acting. Because as I said, we don't know where we're going. We're making great time. I think the final most important thing that I've discovered to align to this new future, there were only supposed to be 9 items on the list, but everybody has to have their spinal tap moment. I've got 10 and might go to 11. Harvest the big global idea machine. I think there has never been a time in which the internet has not played such a potentially powerful role. I know with what I'm doing with my online broadcasting capabilities, I discovered an online community of churches and disc jockeys and singers and speakers who are suddenly aligning to this new world. And for me, it's like drinking through a fire hose. I am discovering 5 or 10 ideas to pursue every single day. The big global idea machine in a time of uncertainty is one of the most powerful things that we have at our disposal. Wendy, I didn't have a moment for a break for a question here, but there probably is a good chance to work this in before we get into my close. Yeah, I should actually share with you the article which went out just a couple of weeks ago, because that was the focus of the interview. I've got a number of answers to that. Number one, vocations, plumbing, electrical, skilled trades. I keynoted the World Skills Organization conference a few years ago in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Now, I don't know the name that it goes under in Australia, but in Canada, it's Skills Canada. In the US, it's Skills USA. And every few years, all these national groups get together for the Global World Skills Competition. And what they do is they bring together young people aged 19 to 21, and they have a competition in the world of plumbing. They have a competition in terms of heavy aircraft maintenance. They have a competition in terms of fine woodworking. What it is, it's like the global Olympics of skilled trades. And this program is implemented in Canada. I know it occurs at the high school level, grade 8, grade 9, grade 10, and eventually they make their way through to higher levels. I look at skilled trades and there's fascinating, wonderful opportunities. Guys like me with a luxurious career as a speaker find themselves in a dramatic new circumstance. I know my plumber, my electrician, my pool repair person, they're still actively working. There is nothing wrong with a skilled trade career path. And we might find that as part of our national discussion where we re-examine what do we do to align to this new world. Well, let's boost up the respect that we have for traditional vocational education. Universities, I think it's a tough situation. My sons are 25 and 26. They're long gone from university. I think if I was a parent with someone scheduled to go into university in the fall, and I'm going to spend $10,000 or $15,000 for them to sit in front of some Zoom sessions, that would be a tough call. I think universities are really going to struggle in terms of what they need to do to reinvent themselves faster with massive budget constraints. Vocational schools, I love them. I've always been a fan because I think they follow the path of what I call just-in-time knowledge. How do we reinvent knowledge programs faster, given the faster emergence of new skills, new careers, new knowledge, the rapid disappearance of existing knowledge. I spoke in New Orleans last year for an association known as the Association of Private Colleges and Universities. And these are really a lot of vocational schools. And I went out on stage and said, look, here is your challenge. You are now in a situation in which you have to deliver knowledge today for jobs that will exist tomorrow, and you do not yet know what those jobs are. How are you going to do that? That's your reality. And that reality has only been accelerated by the speed with which this new future is unfolding. So it's another one of those industries, big, hard questions that we need to address. I, I actually spoke about the intellectual property issue in my broadcast last week or the week before, where I was talking about 3D printing. And I said, I think what we are going to witness as we get this accelerated respect from leadership as to what 3D printing is and the role it can play, we will get a similar level of respect for better management of the massive intellectual property issues that come with it. I think it's going to speed that issue up. Let me give two answers to that. Number one, I know in North America, yesterday was National Teachers Day, and I put out a Facebook post thanking, with full respect, all the teachers who are part of my life. I've got tremendous respect for teachers. I golf with a grade 5 teacher, and I endlessly quiz him about what he does and how he tries to align to these new students, who are so far ahead of the education system. He's got one young individual, and when she needs to get some knowledge in grade 5, she goes out to the Khan Academy to get that knowledge on a YouTube site. The kids are totally different from anything we've ever known. Uh, I have a lot of fun talking to kids, and I actually went into his classroom a couple of years ago, and this video is on my site, where I had them talk about and try to think about the careers and jobs that they might exist and work in 25, 30 years from now. And it's kind of fascinating to hear what their responses were and some of the careers that they might work in. I think what is happening here is we are seeing the emergence of the first generation who has never grown up without an iPad, who has never grown up without the existence of the internet, who has never grown up without a world of a massive a collapse in attention spans. And I think we've got an education system that is quite ill prepared for that. Education is one of the most complex systems to change, to disrupt, to accelerate, to innovate. And who knows what the impact of a world in which all of a sudden a whole bunch of parents are teaching their kids from home. What I do know has happened is a lot of parents have newfound respect for teachers because they realize it's really not that easy. So what do you do with all this stuff? I mean, I've tried to cover a bunch of issues. About 10 years ago, when I was going on stage, I closed with what I call my 10 great words, 10 words that could sort of guide us into our future. And this is the point where I noticed a lot of people out in the audience were writing these words down. So I rolled them into a nice little PDF, and I'll get that to Wendy and she can share that around. But they're powerful words. I think they can give us a structure to think about where we are going. Number one, observe. Spend some time to look around you from a trends perspective and think about what those trends mean. Think about what they mean to you personally. Think about what they mean to folks regionally. Think about what they mean to your economy. Think about what they mean in terms of growth. Observe and think about what is occurring out there. Everything is under a new microscope at this point in time. Change. What do you need to change? Are you one of those folks who've developed an attitude of fear around what is occurring right now? Are you waking up every single morning with absolute dread? I was 2 months ago, but I'm getting up every single day and I go, wow, like there's so much going on, and I want to be a part of it. And I might be missing out on so many opportunities, or what is unfolded out there. So, what do you need to change? What do you need to change in your company? What do you need to change in your organization? I think it's a great word because it helps us to focus on some of the issues that go with innovation. Dare, take some risks, do some things you have not done before. If you stay stuck doing the same old thing, I mean, we all know this, we get the same old thing we always get. You've got to try to do things you haven't done before. A month ago, I committed to going live every single Thursday at 11:30 Toronto time with unproven technology. My first show was okay. My second show was an absolute disaster. A fellow wrote me a scathing review, and I kind of, obsessed about that over a period of a day. And then I said, okay, let's move on. Let's fix it up. So try and do things you haven't done before. Push yourself. Take risks. It's the only way we can get ahead. Banish. Look, I realized years ago, there are people who wake up in every single organization, and the very first thought that comes to their mind is, what am I going to do today to kill great ideas? And I started talking about what I called the innovation killers. These are the words and phrases that we use that hold us back from going forward in the future. And you know what these phrases are? Well, you can't do that because we've always done it this way. It won't work. It's too risky. It's doomed to fail. The boss won't go for it. Why can't we keep doing what we've been doing all along? Look, organizations and people set themselves up with all these excuses, which are simply excuses from, trying to go forward in the future. They're the innovation killers. Banish them, get rid of them. Don't let them exist because they hold you back. Try and do some things you haven't done before. When I would go at a large-scale association event conference in Las Vegas and 7,000 people in the room, I would say, look, take 3 ideas that you heard at this conference and commit to going back to the office and trying to do those things. It's only by trying to do things that we can get ourselves out of a period of aggressive inaction into a period of aggressive action. Try to do the things you have not done before. Empower. Empower yourself with knowledge. Empower yourself with skills. Turn the big global idea machine into your ally to give you a pathway into the future. Question. We develop assumptions and habits and routines that hold us back. Focus on growth because the future is all about opportunity. This changes the opportunity. It might defer some of that opportunity, but there are still people thinking big and bold about where we can go in the future. Become action-oriented. And the 11th most important word of all, because I'm a big fan of Spinal Tap, it always goes to 11, is enjoy. So I'm going to close with this, and Wendy will come back to some Q&A. Does this work? Can you work to reinvent yourself? Well, I had a huge win on the weekend. Last Thursday after my broadcast, I got a call from one of the national news stations here who had some questions about what are organizations doing to reinvent themselves for the faster future. And I said, give me a moment. And I ran down to my home broadcast studio. I put up a futuristic green screen backdrop, and he called me. We had a chat. He turned it into a remarkable story. This is about 90 seconds long that ran on the national news throughout the entire weekend. I tell you, I was absolutely pumped with the results, and I want to share this with you here. Again, we might have a few little sound issues. Wendy will share this video with you over the next several days. It's also on my website.
On this Saturday night, Canadian Reinvention.
It's all about, what we are doing to try to get ready for tomorrow.
The traditional business model takes on a new twist.
Global National with Robin Gill.
COVID-19 has shuttered so many businesses across Canada for now and for good. But sometimes when one door closes, another opens. As the pandemic spotlights the urgency for innovation, Mike Armstrong looks at how Canadians are adapting.
If they wanted to keep selling vehicles at this Alberta auction house, physical distancing meant they had to find a new way of doing it. Well, they're doing it now without people, what was once the most important thing for an auction house.
In one of our larger events, upwards of 15,000 people registered online.
I'm not bad myself.
COVID-19 closures left performer Martin Kerr without anywhere to perform. Bars have shut down, festivals are being cancelled, but instead of sitting at home, Kerr and his manager put out word he'd take gigs just about anywhere.
Requests started flooding in. And we've got about 20 booked already, I think, all over the city.
Disruption is occurring everywhere. Jim Carroll would normally be on a stage somewhere talking trends. He's a futurologist. Instead, he's working out of his home, delivering speeches from a new studio. Carroll says COVID-19 is driving urgency to innovate.
Well, it's all about attitude. It's all about mindset. It's all about, what we are doing to try to get ready for tomorrow.
And let's go!
Whether it's a BC trainer who's moved online or a new production line at a Quebec company making hand sanitizer, Canadians are innovating.
I was like, okay.
One that Carroll's following is an Ontario farmer who'd normally be selling at farmers markets. Instead, in a matter of days, he created a virtual market and distribution system for himself and other producers.
I'm running my farm. Like, I'm growing food. I'm growing even more food right now than I had planned to this year.
Carroll says what innovators are doing is adapting instead of sitting back, and that this era will leave a legacy.
5 or 10 years from now, we're going to look back at this and go like, that was really a massive breeding ground for innovation and creativity that was simply unparalleled.
Carroll may make a living predicting trends and where things are headed, but he says right now in the present, he's having trouble believing how quickly things are moving.
And I truly am. I cannot believe the speed of innovation and creativity that is occurring out there today. It is simply staggering. And I think the key choice for all of you watching today in Australia, Asia, and elsewhere is, what are you going to do to be a part of it? The future is going to happen, whether we like it or not. We might not know exactly where we're going, but heck, we're making absolutely astonishing time. So with that, Wendy, thank you very much for having me in. I know we've been together on social media for quite some time, and this is really a thrill to spend some time with you and with the folks who've signed up for this. And we still have some time for Q&A here.